everyone. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I used to do, or still do, depends on how regularly, these series where I would showcase different photographers that I've come across whose work really sparked my attention, there's something intricate that I wanted to talk about and describe. And so I decided to do this also on YouTube, but a little differently. So each week I will choose a theme and sort of show you the different photographers. I'd say around 5 photographers that really sparked my interest with regards to that particular theme, and explain to you in each of those photographies like what I really enjoyed, what I thought was quite peculiar, unique, and what I learned from. So for this week, I wanted to start off with the theme of trees. I don't know why, but trees, for some reason, I painted this a couple days ago and it got inspired by trees, so there's something that's been sticking to me around with the theme of trees. And I think it might be related to the fact that the last time I was actually photographing and truly immersed in nature was when I was at the Yosemite National Forest. And I think also it's because summer's already gone by so fast, which is insane, and that we're entering into my favorite season for trees, which is autumn. So yeah, I wanted to start off with this particular theme. So here we go. Okay, we're going old school with this because, well, this is the equipment I have. So one of the first things that I really enjoy about trees, obviously, is their color scheme. And one of the elements that I especially adore is if I have a pool of water that I can do reflection on. So I'm gonna start off showing you guys a couple of the photographs that I took. So this was at, I think it was the Bronx Zoo, yes. And so one of the parts that is amazing about the trees in New York when it's fall is obviously the insane amount of colors that arise. So I took this photograph, I think it was also on the moving train in the zoo, so not that easy, but there was a part of water. And sometimes what's fun about when you have reflection is not forcibly to have the reflection perfectly symmetric or in the middle of the photograph. Sometimes it's fun to play on the arcs of the trees, and so that's what I tried to do here, where basically the water stops here and all of this is the reflection, but it sort of fades into the water, and there's sort of that confusion, no clear demarcation. So that's been a lot of fun for that. The other element is to always look up. It's one of those shots that you think anyone can do, and really, so what if everyone can do it? Each photograph you take at each instance is going to be different. And so look up, like there's so much like interesting things you can do, either with a clear blue sky or snowy clouds, or even if it's like not that great of a colored sky, play on the contrast, play it with the leaves, play with the branches. You can have, there's a shot that I'm gonna show you guys a little later that a lot of people do where it's sort of that opening in between the tree branches is perfectly centered. The number of photographs I've seen that have that same perspective and yet have completely different feelings, or like that emulate different emotions, and how unique they are, even though the perspectives seem similar, is insane. So definitely another tip, I would say. So the first photographer I want to show you guys is the handle UN Circle. Wait, let me just, I think I should probably say the names of the people first. So UN Circle seems it's Pauline Barret and Michael Samama. Please also, if I pronounce incorrectly your names, please let me know. There's no pronunciation button like there is on LinkedIn. So I really want to I apologize if I don't pronounce it correctly. But so yeah, their handle is UN Circle. And what I absolutely love is they have that road trip vibe to their photographs. But you feel like you're cocooned in that same location. And it's quite unique. The number of people who I know do road trips, and when I did a couple myself, where I didn't even think of taking a photograph in the car like they do. And you always think, oh, let me get out of the car and then take the photograph. They've actually been able to create something quite incredible. So let me show you. First one is, can you guys see? This one. And so what's really interesting is the colors are sort of muted and dark, but it creates sort of an element of hominess. And then all the elements of the car are flou. What's the word in English? Non-focused, I guess would be the word in English. And so I really enjoy the photograph. I think what's also interesting is you have no clue where the road is. It sort of seems like all the trees are meddled in and you're stuck. And you're not trying to grab the entire tree. It's just really like, if I were in a car, what do I see from the back of the car? And yeah, it works just perfectly. I really enjoy this photograph. The other one that they did was this one, which they changed the angle of, can you guys see? Hopefully. They changed the angle of the lens within the car. So this time, instead of being like straight front, it's from the side. And you have like that one large tree. I mean, there's a couple little ones everywhere, but that perfectly like large one, which is in the big window, and then the second largest tree is in this little one. And so what's also fascinating, and I don't know if my camera is able to capture this, but here it's all sort of in the blue tones, and then here it's also in the like more purple pink tones. And so it's as if you're seeing two separate landscapes, and yet they're so similar as well. What's also interesting is because you're taking the photograph from the side and the tree is a little angled to the side, I don't know why, but there's sort of that synonymous element to it that just works perfectly. Yeah, and you feel like you're part of that trip. And there's something so artistic about it as well, even though it's something that any of us, in essence, right? Like you're in a car, you have trees, you know, everything's there for you to take that picture. So it's really fascinating to see that that's what they were able to create in such an artistic manner. And the third one from the same account is this one that I really enjoyed. Now, yes, I don't know what the titles are of the photograph, like I know the captions, but because some photographers put names of photographs, others put large captions, I'm just showing you the photographs without like giving you the title because it's not always clear. But definitely if you know, UN Circle, if you ever watch this video, let me know so I can put it in the comments below. I'll put anyways all of the links of the photographers that I talk about in the description box below. But so yeah, so what I really enjoyed with this photograph is this time you sort of see that road element which is here, and it's as if like you feel like they got out of this sort of tunnel trees and there's an opening, right? So you feel like you know where they came from and where they're headed. What's also quite fun is how when you look at it's as if the mirror of or like the window of the car is the entire box of trees. So it kind of perfectly encompasses the sky, which is quite fun. And yeah, that sort of green muted color scheme works perfectly, and even with more sky. that I think is also one fun element, is to always use the branches of the trees as sort of your frame. It creates a really interesting and unique perspective. And I know I've had a couple fun tries with that, where I would use the branches of the trees to frame not just a landscape, but also to frame sometimes buildings. So these are really beautiful photographs, and I know that they're part of road trips, but you can always try some of these techniques in a city, or like a city park or garden. It doesn't need to be, you know, like you're going to some phenomenal place. You can try with the trees that you have right here. And one element is to use the tree as sort of like a frame to any building that you see, or any window. Those are quite fun ways to do that as well. So next photographer that I wanted to show you guys is Tim Tolhuisen. Hopefully that's right. Whose Instagram is Toltim with an H in between the L and T. I'll put it in the description box anyways. So we're really like about his first photograph that I'm gonna go show you guys is perspective, right? So how incredible are these roots and this trunk? It creates even, like, it accentuates even more the size of the trunk. And so I love like playing with the lines of the sort of shapes within the trunk, that it's as if it's like twisting on itself. And what's one of my fears sometimes when I take photographs, or one of the first instincts, is, oh my God, it's not in focus. And here at the bottom part of the photograph, it's not in focus, but it works perfectly. And so that for me is something that I've started to realize. It's like, you don't need to have everything in focus in the photograph for it to be incredible. And instead, here having sort of that unfocused element with sort of the, how do you say in English? Shoot. The confusion, that's not the correct word, but basically here it creates sort of this messiness of unfocusedness with the messiness of all the leaves where they're all everywhere around, but it perfectly accentuates even more the trunk because of that. The other thing is, if you're taking a photograph of one tree, you don't need for it to be perfectly centered in the tree. I started loving putting things a little bit more on the side. And it's really just slightly done, but it has your gaze going from in diagonal. And so it perfectly opens your scope of perspective from one angle to the other in the photograph in a direct line, which creates sort of this easiness for someone who is looking at this photograph for the first time. You naturally go here and upwards, as if you yourself are taking that same trip, so to speak. The second photograph that I really enjoy and goes with that whole reflection thing I was talking about at the beginning is this one. If you know me, you know I'm obsessed with reflections in water. Still trying to do something around puddles, but we'll talk about that another time. But what's fun is also when you have a clear line, because you accentuate even more of the lines of every element in the photograph. Never be too scared of taking sky, like having more sky. That's something that I actually had to unlearn because I was told like, oh, you're putting too much sky, or like maybe put more ground or more sky, but like don't do both. It's really fun to do it with reflections and with trees, because you create more of a contrast between the clouds in this case, and the contrast even within the color of the sky with the very clear demarcations of the trees. And this also goes with the idea of putting things on the side and for it to not be perfectly symmetric, right? So here, having that, my eye straight goes to these trees. But if I'm looking at it for the first time, my eyes first went here before going here and then straight. And so each of your photographs are gonna have that sort of foundational path of gaze, but sometimes there's that one element that just captures the attention to an unknown viewer, and you might not know what it is, and that's kind of the fun element of it. And with reflections, that's even funnier, because I've asked a couple friends sometimes to tell me what they saw first, and some people will not in the, like, I haven't shown them this photograph yet, but for example, I know that some of my friends would probably look at this first, or look here, or look here. And so there's no clear starting point with photographs like this, which is always fun. The third photographer I wanted to show you guys is Karim. Again, apologies if it's not well pronounced, but Tara is a photographer that I really enjoy because she plays on the weather a lot, whether it's on the fogginess or the snow or the rain. And that creates a whole new dimension also on the tree itself. And so the tree still remains the sole element of the photograph that I looked into, but the mood in which she captures is really quite fun. So this is the first photograph. Let me zoom in. So in this photograph, it's a snowy landscape. The tree is a little off-centered, but it's actually in, let me just check. Yeah, it's sort of like in the same direction as the snow. But what's fun is, like, when you look at a tree, you always have that instinct of looking up, but the snow is going down and you can see it in the movement. And so there's that sort of like pass-by contrast that happens. What's also fun in these types of photographs is she didn't try and capture the entire tree, and you don't need to. Even just like cutting it off, and it doesn't need to be just at the trunk or just at like when you have a couple leaves. It's kind of like a little awkward that it's cut that way, but it works, and I like that. It's unusual per se, at least in what I've seen or done personally, but it works perfectly with what she's trying to capture. And so I would always say, like, test the different, like, where do I crop or where do my lens stop? And you'll be surprised by what you actually will create, or what you end up actually liking, and not always what your eye was formed to do. This is also why I like these types of exercises that I do for myself, where I like discover what other photographers do, or their different lenses and point of views, is I end up questioning mine, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but having that questionnement, or that idea of questioning yourself, it's kind of fun afterwards, because you get to test a little bit more, or you go a little bit crazier, so to speak, on your next photography adventures. The other is to frame, but playing on what's clear and foggy as a framing element. So in this case, what I really enjoy is personally, my eye went straight to this tree because it's the clearest, darkest, it just worked. And so I end up going to this sort of foggy tree, which looks as if it's like a reflection, and back down to where the person is. And so you end up doing this loop, which is where the focus technically of the photograph seems to be, because that's the like clearest and sort of more delimited space. And so you end up with the trees, whether it's very focused or foggy, end up doing that loop, which is the shape that you see. And that's always fun to play on the contrast, but sometimes that contrast is actually naturally done. So that's actually one of the types of photographs I haven't yet tried, which is with the fog. So that's on my bucket list, but I haven't found the perfect fog yet. The next photographer that I wanted to talk to you guys about is Nikraf Takur. So he's done like quite a lot of landscape photography, and he plays a lot on that light, the sunlight. And so I'm like really obsessed with photographs that play on sunlight. That's something that I haven't yet tested, but that is also on my bucket list. I don't know if you guys can see correctly. Hopefully you guys can. What's fun is you feel like the trees are levitated, because they're like the clearest, really quite of like 2/3 up the photograph, and then the rest is just unclear. You have that perfect progression of like the dark to the light, and then sort of that unclearness because of the light and this, I don't know what it's called, like the cloudiness of the light. But I really enjoy this photograph, especially because you sort of have that light line that's just like unclear where you're supposed to look. Does that make sense? Probably not. Let me rephrase that. Basically, my eye went straight here, and then it felt like I had different levels, linear levels that I had to look at. And yet the light that's like going through the trees is coming directly towards you. And so it's a contrasting line. And there's something sort of 3D about it, if that makes sense. So I really enjoy that. And plus the color scheme of that like yellowiness contrasted with the, like the dark blacks is really, really beautiful. The other one is related to what I was talking about around skies and lights and color. He really does well with lighting, and I think in this case he was also really aided with the beautiful yellow tones of the trees. But look at this incredible photograph. So you have this like 3 dimension to the photograph. You have the bottom here, sort of the tree with the horizon, and then the sky. See what I mean when like you shouldn't be scared of having too much sky? But that's also because look at how textured that sky is. And the texture that you have here is so different than when you have here. And so you're able to create not only like a color contrast, but also like a textural one. So this is really beautiful photograph, which was in Colorado, and definitely makes me want to go there. The other photograph is what I was talking to you guys about, looking up in the sky. So see how different this is what I had done. Now someone else looks up the sky, up the trees, and captured as it new location. Okay, yes, new location, but still, look at how different. Isn't that beautiful? And because all the trees are coming to one center focus, it's a different angle. And you're feeling like you're turning on yourself and looking up at the trees. The only thing missing is like a beautiful soundtrack of like birds and all that stuff. But yeah, I really, really enjoy this photograph a lot. I think what would be really cool if he ever goes in that same location is to find some way or be there when there's like a contrasting sky as well, because that same yellow tones and all that stuff would be so different as well, and would have that different feeling. But imagine like you're in the same, like in a different location, same sort of perspective, with green trees and a dark perspective, like a darker sky, like more stormy sky. So different in atmosphere, and yet the idea and the perspective and the focus is the same. But no photograph will ever be the same. 3 seconds and I don't know, you might have a bird that comes up or a tree that falls or rain. Anything can happen. And I think that's also what I enjoy a lot about photography is even one thing that just doesn't always change. You'd be surprised. So the last photography I want to show you guys is called Sahaya. And I don't know why, but whenever I look at his photographs of trees, I feel like I'm in Lord of the Rings or any of those sort of science fiction fantasy worlds. What's the one on Netflix right now. There's like a couple of them on Netflix. But yeah, I get that same feeling. So, and I'll show you guys why. So the first photograph I really enjoy is this one. So I think it's helped with the sort of purpliness of the ground, contrasted like that dark, beautiful emerald green, and then the fogginess aspect all around it. Tree is a little off-centered, awkwardly cut. Roots are focused this time, but it's contrasted with the fog. And so it sort of creates this majestic fantasy feeling to it. And it works perfectly for this photograph. And I automatically, I don't know why, but I feel like I automatically start with angles. But trust me, it might change actually. When we do a couple more weeks, you might see that maybe my eye will shift differently. But in this case, it started here and it went straight up and just gazed around. Mostly I think here is what it seems. I always do this where I try and find like how I first looked at the photograph and like how it's evolved during my second look and third look. Definitely recommend doing that. I don't know why, but it changes. Sometimes I understand why and sometimes I don't, but I like trying to figure it out. But yeah, so the contrast of the colors, which are so deep and jewel tones on the bottom, contrasted with this sort of like milky bluiness of the fog on top, is also this perfect separation, juxtaposition of the two. So definitely beautiful photograph. The other photograph that I wanted to show is this one. So again, in this one, plays more on the orange and the greens. The fogginess is a little more toned down, right? Because the three trees here are a little more, four actually, are a little more apparent. The tree this time is centered. But what's fun is with the shape of the trees, it's as if they're, I don't know why, but it's as if they're holding down the top of the photograph, because they're all sort of curved with their branches sort of holding something up, and yet they're all perfectly cut at the moment where you feel like they're holding something. And so it feels like there's a part missing of the photograph that you're wanting to go look up. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well. The other one that I wanted to show you guys is this. It has the same feeling as that first one that I was showing you guys. But the difference is it's less jeweled tones. There's no focus on one tree. You automatically go for the little person, but it ends up not being the focus either, right? You automatically go there, but for some reason, I'd circle back to these two large trees. It's as if you're sneaking up on a scene that you shouldn't, but you end up getting mesmerized by the trees that are there. And compared to the other two, the tree itself takes much more of the space of the photograph. And so I would suggest that as well. Try and see where you place the tree, but also how much of the tree takes the space of the photograph. So yeah. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this sort of discovery of photographers that I enjoyed finding around trees and their different photographs that inspired me or taught me something. I think my main three things around photographing trees is to test out where you're placing the trees, the perspective, like whether you take it from the roots, from afar, from on top, or looking up, but also where you crop the tree. To not be scared of unfocusedness, and to play around with the weather. Like go back to that same tree 3 days in a row and I guarantee you will have such a different take on the photograph. So yeah, have fun and If you end up going to photograph trees after watching this video, definitely let me know. I would love to see what you guys create. And definitely share with me any other photographers who you also have discovered or have sparked in some sort of passion or creativity in you when you photograph trees. Definitely always loving to discover new people and meet new people and their art. So definitely share that with me. And I will see you guys next week.